we what we call structure these bonds, which means how we place the principal payments over the 15 years around the declining assessment revenues, because assessments are level equal principal each year. That means declining uh, annual assessment revenue. So we just structure the principles so that the levy is equal each year, so we don't have these big fluctuations in the levy. So estimating right now around 140,000 increase in the levy. Water is around 40,000. Sanitary sewer between 25 and 30, and storm around between 45 and 50. So interest rates, we're certainly higher than we have been in the past 15 years. If we think about the years 7 through 15, it's really interest rates certainly feel higher because of those short-term rates, right? Especially our investment rates and everything else. But out there going 10, 15 years, we're still in that 3.5% range, 3 to 4% range. So, not really too much different than historical averages. It's just those shorter maturities, those years 1 through 7, which are significantly higher. For the past 10 years, we've been, everything under 10 years has been under 1%. Now we're, up there in the 3% range for tax exempt bonds. So, they're certainly higher, but they're not as, it's not so bad, especially since in the earlier years we're not accruing as much interest, and so hopefully we'll get through the Federal Reserve meeting this week. Things will stabilize. Everyone will know where it's going, and maybe even hopefully get in and out of recession soon. And once that happens, interest rates will probably come down a little bit. But certainly, can't expect much over the next month in terms of movement in the interest rate. So it looks like right now, the true interest rate, which is essentially the weighted average interest rate that we're looking at, is around 3.5%. So if it's anything different, I'll certainly track it on a daily basis and let the city administrator and finance director know if there's any big changes in the market between now and when we sell. Okay. So the next few weeks, we'll put together the offering document, which is the official statement, and we will prepare for a credit rating. We'll go through a credit rating call with Standard & Poor's. I expect everything to go very well, and take bids on the morning of June 5th and bring it to your consideration that evening.
Okay. Do you expect our rating to be reaffirmed as previous, or?
Yes.
Last one?
I do.
Okay. What was that?
It's AA.
AA. Okay. This is a curiosity question, but how much does it cost if we would have a shorter call period or redemption period? I know that 10 years just seems, if I'm buying it, I would love to have 10 years, but I'm just wondering.
Right. So it changes with the market, but just generally, over time, the municipal market has settled on with the 10-year. If you have a 10-year maturity schedule, you can refund them around 8 years without a penalty, and out to 15 to 20 years, it's really just adding 1 or 2 years. So around nine years, we can without any kind of interest rate penalty.
So you don't see any people that vary off of that schedule?
That deviate from that?
Right.
It's a good question. We typically don't. We do only when we probably have a need to take them out for whatever reason, or if we know we have a certain revenue stream that's just we might amortize it over longer, but we really know that whatever revenue is coming in is going to be coming in like maybe a sales tax, and we're going to be able to pay them off a lot quicker than normal. These, with levy, I mean, we don't want to. Not going to want to just increase the levy lot just to pay these off. Mm-hmm. So what is it, going back to your original question, what does it cost? I think a good rule of thumb is between 5 and 10 basis points a year, depending on market. So, if we go from this, 8-year call down to a 7, we would go from a 3.5 to a 3.6, 3.65.
Yeah.
Each year.
It's a unusual yield curve, so it's like whenever we like to refinance something, it seems like we don't have the ability to do it. But that's just the game. That's just how it is. But,
Right, right. And, yeah, usually when it's steep, we get to that first call date and we are able to, refinance them, but certainly with short-term rates being so high.
yeah.
And the interest rate is fixed throughout the period of the call.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I would take a, let's see, motion to set
Resolution 23050201.
02.
01, or it'd be 0101.
Okay. All right, I would take a motion to approve that resolution. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we have the presentation and acceptance of the 2022 annual financial audit report.
Do you want me to plug in my computer at all and pull it up, or do you have copies?
We have copies.
But if you want to.
Oh, yeah, you should have both a digital copy in the packet as well as a hard copy
Yep.
in the binder.
How long do you think it's gonna take you to go through these 400 pages?
Oh, I'm not going through the 400 pages. I wouldn't do that to you guys. I'll just be going through the PowerPoint, so it should only take 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, that's fine.
We're good with that.
I don't know, do you think we should for the audience?
We can, I mean, the packets are also out online that they could access the information out there.
How many people are online, Mitch?
I know Ken is online. His son has a band concert
I
tonight.
know.
So just Ken?
Just kidding.
And Howard, you probably don't care, do you? I wouldn't.
I can be descriptive.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So like I said, I guess I'll introduce myself first. My name is Abby Schmidt. I'm a manager in the government audit department at Abdo out of the Mankato office. I've been on with Abdo for around 5 years, and I think I've been on the new Prague audit every year since, so I'm getting really familiar with the city. I will just be going through the PowerPoint presentation, which provides a high-level overview of your 2022 audit results. We'll go over our audit opinion, and then get into your general fund and other governmental funds, your enterprise funds, and then a few key performance indicators. So it should start on something like that.
Yep.
196. So slide 3 is going over our audit results. So as auditors, we're required to issue an opinion on the financial statements, stating whether they are materially correct. For 2022, we issued an unmodified or clean opinion, similar to prior years. And we're also required to do some Minnesota legal compliance testing, which revolves around things like your contracting bidding requirements, collateral requirements, things like that. We did find one instance of noncompliance this year that I'll touch on in the next slide. So our audit results are 2022 findings. Similar to prior years, we have a finding for limited segregation of duties. It's just saying there aren't enough people or duties aren't fully segregated to completely mitigate some of those risks around key controls. So with disbursements, things like that, that's where you guys come in. You can provide another set of eyes. But it's really common for cities of your size. It's just the cost of more staff versus the benefit. And then the municipal payment to fire relief, that's that legal compliance finding. So cities are required to remit the fire relief aid to the fire relief within 30 days of receiving it. It was just something that simply was an oversight in 22. Robin's aware, and we expect it to be remedied in 23.
Abby, was there any penalty for that?
No, nope. It's just one of the state statutes that we check to make sure is being followed.
Have you referred to, or the audit refers to city review, the spreadsheet provided, is that in the audit?
It is not, or what are you referring to exactly?
The recommendations, we recommend the city review the spreadsheet provided to see if any duties can be adjusted.
Yep, so during our audit procedures, we have sort of an Excel matrix. It's not in the audit report, but we can make it available to Leah and Robin. It's basically breaks all the different processes into 4 categories: custody of the assets, the control, or the approval, which a lot of times that's where you guys step in, and breaks out who does what, and we can see where things overlap. So if someone writes up the deposit and takes it to the bank, that's something we want to see separated, things like that.
I'd be interested in seeing it if you could put it in the shared drive when you get it, to
Yeah,
see it.
I can certainly send that.
And I'm not sure, I think you've already talked about the compliance finding, so I just wanted to go back to if you already passed that, the segregation of duties referring to cash receipts?
Okay.
Or have you talked, or am I?
I
don't want
just-
to interrupt you, so, but at
Oh,
the same time, I
no,
don't want to.
you're fine. It's kind of all lumped in with that limited segregation of
Okay.
duties. The audit report breaks it down further into each of the cycles.
Right. I
But it's one finding.
I just wanted more clarity because these are similar findings every year, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand the issue. But on this particular one, the cash receipts, how much money do we actually get in the mail? Is that a material issue?
It's not necessarily a material audit finding. It's really revolving around the controls.
Right,
So
right.
whether it's $5 or
Right.
$1,000, it's just about who's performing which duty. Is it segregated enough? And that's really what the finding comes down to.
So I'm just curious, do we not have 2 people look at the mail when it opens up? Or-
I would have to look back in our documentation, and I definitely think there's potential to add some controls to maybe eliminate this finding in the future, and maybe that's something we can chat about. When it's a little slower in the summer, and just figure out what staff is truly doing what, and where there are places to kind of add extra controls. Because we know sometimes there's simply not enough people to do everything completely split, but sometimes if you put enough mitigating controls and one extra check here and there, we feel reduces the risk enough.
Right, I totally agree. I worked at a bank, so I know that we
Yep.
always had 2 people look at mail.
Yep.
And that was the audit. And I just assumed we did that here. So cash is the issue, because you don't have someone to if only one person's doing it.
For the
That's a
receipt
big
portion of it, yep, so that would be a piece of it. I would have to look back at the specific documentations. I don't know off the top of my head, but we should have that documented from our audit. And we can certainly send over that matrix to Robin.
Abby, would you mind just giving some input on how common that finding is for other cities that you might audit that are our size or
Yep.
comparable?
Yep, I would say it's in 90% of our clients. Clients even larger than New Prague have it. I'd say our larger ones that they truly have separate almost departments for every cycle are ones where we don't see it as much. A few smaller cities have been able to add enough kind of checks and balances, which I think is definitely a possibility here, but it is really common. It's more common than not to have that finding.
Right, it's just, it seems like such an easy fix, and I'm so used to seeing it in other businesses that
Right.
I
Yeah, I definitely
was
think
kind
it's
of
something we could
surprised.
take a
I'm
look at
surprised
further.
that that many cities wouldn't have 2 people look at mail.
Right. Some of them only have one person in the office, so it's
Right.
just impossible, but I think there are enough staff here and to look at it further and see how much more we can split things out and maybe eliminate at least some of those cycles out of the finding.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I get into the general fund?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So the next fund, the general fund balances, this compares your budget, which is that yellow line, to your fund balance policy, which is to maintain 50% of your unassigned fund balance in the general fund. So you can see the fund balance policy and unassigned fund balance overlap. The city makes adjustments so that you're only keeping, or you're making sure you're following your policy, but able to assign out those other funds for projects or restrictions, things like that. You will see, I just wanted to note, you might see that the budget increased quite a bit from 22 to 23. I'm sure you're aware of that, due to planned spending down of those ARPA dollars is a portion of it. And then when we met to discuss the draft, it sounds like in the past, if there was spending that didn't happen, it wasn't necessarily rebudgeted for. But I think there's been a lot of equipment delays and things like that with COVID. So those are being rebudgeted to when you're actually going to spend them versus when you thought you would be purchasing them. Slide 6 is your general fund budget to your actual results. Excuse me. The middle column is going to be what your actual results were in 22. The left-hand side is your final budget amounts, and the right-hand column being the variance. So really the only thing of note is that you were over budget in your revenues by around $226,000. Quite a bit of that was some more licenses and permits than expected. Re-roof permits due to hail damage, just nothing you can really anticipate there. And then the interest earnings were budgeted pretty conservatively, so you came out with around 80,000 more than expected there. But all in all, your fund balance increased by 250,000 versus your budgeted of 6,700.
So that's the note that the city budget didn't match the council-approved budget?
Nope.
Okay, so that's something different, okay.
Oh, yep. So there is something in the executive governance summary that it's just another matter. It's not it doesn't warrant a finding. There was just minor differences between what was put into the county system versus what the council approved. None of those budgets. It didn't have to do with the general fund. It was some of the new special revenue funds. I think like ARPA didn't match in the system, but we've talked to Robin about it, and we're not worried about it happening in the future. It was just something we had to note.
Thank you.
Is that because we normally approve on a revised budget towards the end of the year and we didn't do that last year? Is that what you're referring to, or is that
No.
something different?
I think it was just I believe it was the ARPA fund and maybe one other new fund that was put in the system. I don't know if you remember, Robin, put in the system but not in the packet, or vice versa.
Yeah, I'm just searching for, like you said, one of them was the ARPA funds. They were all non-general fund. So, like ARPA and maybe one other grant fund. So I will look here and verify. So it just wasn't historically part of the budget approval process. So then in 22, it wasn't in the packet as well. So
Yeah. So I think it was just didn't get run in the report. It was a new fund. We always check to make sure what comes out of the accounting software matches what the council approves. So that's kind of how we caught that. The slide 7 takes us through your general fund revenues by type for the last 3 years. So not a ton to note. Your tax collections were up, but that ended up being right in line with what you budgeted for. So nothing really a surprise there. And your other revenues includes your interest earnings, which was up around 80,000 from prior year. So nothing major there. Your expenditures by type, public safety, I would say, is the only one really with anything major to note. There was some increase in overtime due to staff shortages, so it was around 166,000 up in payroll and benefit costs from prior year. So that's kind of the bulk of your increase there. The rest are kind of either steady, or you can see with inflation just steadily increased since 2020. Any questions on the general fund before we move on?
Abby, I have the answer on our
Perfect.
accounts there. So one of them was a non-departmental, and I don't think the amount was material. It was a Fund 320, on some separate, tax funds that were received. And then, as we've talked about, the ARPA was just put into a separate account for tracking purposes. So those were the two main accounts. And then, $499 for, special projects as well, wasn't in the budget historically, so. Or I should say in the budget presentation. So as, like Abby mentioned, it's part of the accounting system, but just something that wasn't in the budget packet when it was presented to you guys.
Slide 9, we'll just touch real quick on your special revenue funds. There wasn't really any major fluctuations this year, really steady, healthy fund balances in all of them. The American Rescue Aid, so we only recognize revenue in there as it's spent. So you're not really ever going to end up with a big fund balance there, even though you did receive that ARPA money. It's sitting in unearned since you haven't spent it. So that's the only thing of note there. Your capital project fund balances, I just want to touch on a couple of the deficits. We had talked with Josh and Robin about how those are being funded. So the 10th Avenue Southeast Crossing, you just haven't received, at the end of the year, you hadn't received the grant funding yet, so it went into a little bit of a deficit. The CIP 2023, which we were just talking about the bonding for that, so that's how that's being funded. And then that TH19 waiting on some state reimbursements until the landscaping was done. So that's kind of where those were sitting at the end of 22.
Have we received any of that yet by May?
Have we received which?
Well, if we were holding like 10th Avenue, that federal grant through 2022, have we received it yet from, it's May 1st now, so I was gonna just inquiring in the last 5 months.
The 10th Avenue one we have not received yet.
Okay. Do we have an idea when that comes in, or?
I don't off the top of my head.
I'm not
Okay.
entirely sure.
And then how about the state one? I mean, we did finish the landscaping, didn't we? Or,
I believe there were a couple other landscape issues that we were the state was waiting on. I know we talked to Chris Knutson about it, and he was basically tracking that down for us.
oh, okay.
Your debt service fund, so this is a look at all of your outstanding debt at the end of 22. This is only only the governmental portion. The enterprise portions we covered a little bit later. What I really think is a better snapshot is slide 12, which is the graph of what your debt payments look like over the next 10 years. So they do drop off around 2028 when one of those bonds is paid off, but with the bonding of the CIP 23 through 25, it's going to flatten out. Anything above that, you're going to see higher than this graph, but it should be planned out pretty well where this should stay flat really across, sitting around 1.25 million in obligations per year.
Does this graph just reflect the net tax capacity levy requirements, or is this including assessments and everything?
So this is includes all of your payments due. So the dark orange is all your principal due each year, and then all the interest. So no matter the funding source, it
Okay.
includes all of the payment. Yep. We'll get into your enterprise funds now. So starting with your water utility fund, the top graph for all of these enterprise funds are going to compare your operating receipts to your disbursements and debt. So obviously as enterprise funds, you want your operating receipts to cover those payments. They should be self-sufficient funds. Across the board, your enterprise funds in 21 are a little skewed because you paid off some debt. But in 22, it went back to kind of how 2020 and 2019 looked, where your operating receipts do cover those disbursements. Nothing major there. There was a 3% increase in rates, so we feel that's a good increase for the rising costs with everything and making sure that you can cover your planned projects. And then the bottom graph shows your actual cash, which is the orange, and then what we calculate as a a basic minimum target cash balance of your following year's debt service coverage and 50% of operating costs. So some cash was spent down, but really that was bond proceeds that was spent on projects. So you're almost back to where you were in 2020, but still above the minimum target. Similar in the sewer fund, there was a 2% increase in rates, but your operating receipts are steady above your disbursements and debt payments. Your cash has been steady, which is good for, I mean, raising costs and aging of equipment and things like that. Nothing's getting cheaper, so having a good cushion in your enterprise funds is good to see. Your electric fund, it also had around 2% increase in rates. Again, nothing really major here. Your operating disbursements are below your operating receipts, so it's maintaining self-sufficient. Spent down some cash, but I believe that was debt proceeds as well, or capital purchases. So still above that minimum target cash balance where you want to be. Your golf fund this year was right in line, which it has been. I think it might have even had enough operating receipts to cover operating disbursements and debt, which is great to see. You can see on the bottom graph that the cash increased quite a bit. There was debt issued and it wasn't all spent during the year it was issued. So we expect that to drop down a bit. But even without the debt, you take that out of the equation. You did cash flow in the golf fund this year, around $100,000. So it seemed like all around a good year for golf last year.
Cool.
And your ambulance fund is healthy, enough receipts to cover those disbursements, and it's been steadily growing that cash year over year. And then your last enterprise fund, your stormwater, the prior year, again, you paid off 3 bonds, so it was back to consistency in 22 with enough receipts to cover those payments, and then you're well above your cash as well. There were some acquisitions of capital assets, so you spent down a little bit of your cash, but still up from 2020. Slide 19 is just a snapshot, all of your cash kind of stacked on top of each other. So almost the exact same as last year. Some of it bond proceeds not quite spent, the majority of it in enterprise funds, but again, be able to fund some of those projects and equipment without bonding is always a good outlook to have. Yeah, not a lot to note on the cash balances. Getting into those few key performance indicators. So on slide 20, the graph on the left takes us through your tax rates. The graph on the right is your taxes per capita. And it compares it to other class 4 cities. So that's cities between $5,000 and $10,000, or population, not dollars. And then other cities in Scott County. So New Prague will be the black line, kind of compared across. I will note there is no 2022 information out yet for the peer groups, so we just like to show the trend of where you're at with your peers. So your tax rate has been decreasing from 2019, and it has been really consistent with your taxes per capita as well. Maybe a slight increase, but we've kind of seen that across the board. Levies kind of had to increase the last couple years. So you're still being able to keep those tax rates steady, but the levy had to go up a little bit in 22. The next one is going to take you through your debt, so your long-term debt per capita, and then your debt service expenditures as a percent of your current expenditures. So you do have quite a bit more debt per capita. Some of it comes from electric debt. Not all cities have an electric fund in general, so that's added, storm sewer as well. But you are trending down on your debt service expenditures as a percent of your total expenditures. So I don't think there's really anything to worry about not being in line with your peers. You've maintained the levy and your tax rate, and taxes per capita have remained steady. It's just that there seems to be some more debt outstanding, more projects going on in New Prague. On the expenditure side, you're right in line with other cities in Scott County, actually below other Class 4 cities on your current expenditures. Your capital expenditures, those are gonna vary year to year. You really are in line. 21 was a little bit of an outlier, but nothing of concern there.
Abby, the expenses, the information that you're providing us on Class 4 cities and things like that, is that something available that I or others could see that kind of pure data?
I believe so. We pull it, someone in our group pulls it online. They release kind of all this pure data at once. I haven't pulled it in years, so I would have to look up or ask my colleague where we get that, but it should be readily available. I mean, it's all public information and it just gets summarized and.
Like, who does it? The state of Minnesota
Yeah,
or?
the state.
Okay.
Yep. So they usually release it around, they release the prior information around March. So that's where we get that, yeah.
I was interested in trying to compare ourselves in a little more detail in different expenses
Okay.
over time.
Yep.
And
I don't know that it goes, the information we get doesn't go in super detailed categories, but we can do custom peer groups. So if there's certain cities you want to compare yourself to specifically, we can pull that out directly and compare New Prague to those cities. If that's something you're interested in the future. I'd have to look at the categories on what the information the state actually, the raw information that the state provides, if it's broken out by general expenses or street expenses, things like that.
thanks.
So the last slide is on your enterprise funds, and it's just your water and sewer fund debt service coverage. So it's just saying you're well in line with your peer groups and you're able to cover your debt service expenditures like we saw. You're cash flowing enough to cover those and you're not running any sort of deficit. So you don't have to worry about covering your bond payments. So all in all, we didn't see any major concerns in the financials. Nothing really specific. There's a fair amount of reserve in your major enterprise funds, but it's kind of spoken for. There's a plan for how it's going to be spent, future projects, things like that. So it's safe to stay conservative, but there's always a growth focus, we feel, in New Prague. So yeah, we don't have really any concerns. Are there any questions for me?
I always have a lot of questions. So
That's okay.
I apologize.
I'll do my
I'm just
best.
Trying to understand things.
Yep.
I think I asked last year about the mark-to-market and how we have to show that even though we're usually holding investments to maturity.
Yep.
So, and now that we're doing a little bit more of that are through the 4M fund and things. I just, sometimes you'll see such big variances, big negatives or big positives. I just wonder if we shouldn't be, or I know you don't show it on the audit either, a contra account. So you show what actual interest income you're actually making and then having an offset of the market number. Because like last year we had budgeted 10,000 and we made $91,000 in interest income. And I'm not sure if that's all interest income or if that's
Right.
some mark-to-market in there.
Yep, and for, in 2022, I spoke with Robin, and there is a separate market value adjustment account set up now in 22. I think maybe specifically for the 4M fund. For the audit report, I don't know that we can technically show it on a separate line, but internal reports can be pulled to show what your actual cash received is for interest earnings versus. Because you're right, it does skew it. I mean, we've had to report negative interest earnings the last couple of years, and having to explain that it's probably not really, you're not paying money for that since you're holding till maturity. But
Sure, and we see it on the utilities, we show a negative, and we're used to seeing that. But now we're seeing different numbers on the general fund and other accounts. But it'd be nice to know if that 91,000, if that was all actual cash or not.
I don't know
But
off the top of my head, I'd have to look back, but I know that, there are contra accounts set up, at least in the general fund, I believe. So it is information we can readily pull, if you want to get that information.
yeah, I think over time, it's just nice to know how we're doing it, if we actually have money or not.
And it's hard because it's one time in the year, so it's right at December 31st. It could go right up again in January. So it's hard to know the real trend of that. But yeah, I can certainly look at what that contra would be for the total at the end of 22.
Yeah, I think our practice and policy would be that we're holding everything to maturity, so we're not really ever gonna realize
Right.
the benefit or the loss, but, and that, I guess that leads me to a different question. Do you see a lot of cities having policy limits on that mark-to-market number?
No certain policies that I've seen. It's just adjusting it at year end to market value, just so it's in compliance with GAAP. So
Yeah. We always had that at the bank, and that's why you see banks are failing now, because of this particular issue, but. I was a little confused on the unrestricted amounts, but maybe I can just think some more about that and ask Robin to forward you a question. I just didn't seem the number didn't seem to flow right on the audit, at least how it was described. At least I didn't understand it anyway, but there seems just to be different numbers in different parts and different pages. As
Gotcha.
far as the unrestricted amounts, and then the percentage of 12.5% and some other percentage, I just couldn't see how it fit, but.
yeah, I don't have the full report with me right now, but if you want to dig into that, and I can certainly, my email is, if you want to email me directly, it's on the last slide of the PowerPoint. Otherwise, Robin can forward on any questions. Oh, you don't have my last page is our contact information.
It's in our electronic packet.
Oh, it's on the.
Yeah. So page 221, I think.
And then lastly, this might not be for you, Abby, but maybe for you guys. The number that's referenced for the house rental as an asset, are we talking about this house right here? On the balance sheet?
Is it the land held for resale? The lots?
Do you have, which page you're looking at?
Well, I have to dig through 200 pages to try to find the balance sheet. Do you remember what page our general fund balance sheet?
The general,
It seemed to me a new line that we didn't have in other years. And I think it said rental house.
Yep, I seen that too.
And the only rental house that I was familiar with was the one we were dealing with earlier this year or last year.
Well, utilities as a rental house.
Oh,
also, correct.
would that be on our general fund?
no. The only thing I could think of in the balance sheet for the general fund would be the lots held for resale.
I think it's page 167. Okay, it's under the general fund, and it's,
So I would have to look, since that is funds that we are holding. I don't wanna really make a guess and be
Or is
wrong on
is
that.
it a restriction?
It is a, assigned
Oh,
line for
gotcha.
the rental house.
Gotcha. So it's assigned for future spending, I believe, is what that is for.
That's just our assigned funds year over year, that we've maintained.
It's not an asset held,
here.
it's just.
yeah, I see it,
an
and
assigned-
now assigned
yeah.
for under equipment, vehicles. The next line is renovations, then this line, which I think is new, rental house. And I guess the question in my mind was, is this the value we're attributing to this land, or is it actually cash? we're
It would
holding in
not.
account?
I believe that would be cash that we are sitting on, that we've at this point assigned just to that house. This is my guess. I have to look up to, I would guess that we assigned some funds to that house in case we had to make repairs. That way we weren't stuck trying to find the cash.
Oh,
So historically, it was assigned, like Josh is explaining, assigned fund balance for items related to the rental house. And so then every year we take any expenditures and the revenues and increase or decrease that assigned fund for the rental house.
So yeah, so at some point when that rental house goes away, whatever funds are left in there, we can just reassign to somewhere else. That's kind of similar to, we started putting money away for a rainy day with the fire pension. Same thing with the rental house. Should something have happened, we had funds sitting there. We weren't just collecting the rent and making it disappear into the general fund.
so this could have been all the rental over the years or something?
No.
Well,
'cause
unless there
that-
was expenditures that went against it. I would be surprised if it wasn't in the 22 report because it's been on our internal work papers, but I can look back and see. So,
Yeah, I just, in my situation of age, it could have been, I just don't remember. I wouldn't. But it just stuck out to me. But I just don't recall seeing it. I just assumed it was the valuation of this house, which I'm assuming we're gonna tear down eventually. And then I wondered,
Yes,
do
yes.
we have to write it off?
Yeah, so once we tear that down, any funds that are left assigned to that, we can just assign somewhere else, attached to somewhere else.
But you're saying this is actually cash?
Correct.
Do,
Yeah,
it
but
was reported last year as well with that, as indicated in the 2023 report. The 61,381 was reported in 2022, or for 2021's audit.
yeah, last year was 56,519.
Correct.
Yeah, the rent that was being paid barely covered the,
Yeah, so that must be, that
expenses.
must be funds that were put in there at some other point then. I know it's entirely possible, since we do try to maintain that 50%, that maybe there was a year we had some surplus, and so some extra funds were just assigned to that as a cover just in case. It doesn't mean that we have to spend them on the rental house, that's just where they're sitting right now.
So last year is 56,519?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a valuation on our balance sheet for that building?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware of.
Thanks, I think that's all I got.
Did you have something, Sean? I did.
yeah, I was making some note, if we go back just a quick second on the debt service, I think I missed part of the quick, the presentation. I was making some notes on the previous slide, but, so on page 21, the debt key performance indicators, so that there's no concern there, even though it looks like we're drastically higher than where our like cities are? Like
No,
minded?
if your tax levy was way out of line with your peer groups, it would be more of a concern, I would say. But since your tax rate and tax levy's really consistent with your peers, I don't think it's a concern. It's just your peer groups or cities your size don't necessarily have kind of the activity that New Prague does. So you just by inherently have more debt because of that.
What do you mean activity, when you say activity, though?
Just the projects, the large street projects, things like that.
For a city our size, I think to do a project every year is rare.
Yeah.
I know previous jobs I've been in, you might see a project every 3 or 4 years. And so their debt levies or debt service levies are naturally lower because they're only borrowing every 3 or 4 years, where New Prague for the last 25 years has made it a mission to let's get everything up to par. And it's naturally driven our debt service levy higher because we're borrowing every single year. So that's all you're seeing. Like she said, in terms of what we're being taxed, it's actually very similar, if not lower, than either Piers or Scott County. And so in that rate, their taxes are going to something other than debt, whereas more of our taxes are going to debt.
So what will that do, though, if our levy went outside of our peers, and let's say we had, because we're looking at several really big projects that might need to happen, how would that skew that number? I mean, you said it was, it was okay right now because we're in line with our peers, but if all of a sudden our levy goes substantially higher.
I
what
mean,
would that do?
the way things are kind of planned right now, if you look at, where is it? Slide 12, I mean, your past debt is scheduled to drop off gradually, and so as you issue those new bonds for those new projects, it should level out, so your levy should just be able to stay the same. Anything on top of that is going to increase your levy, and it will be higher than your peers. It just depends on the funding for the project, and if, you move forward with it, looking at what that levy increase would have to be.
Does that higher debt though weigh on our bond rating though, when Standard and Poor's looks at it, or?
I am not,
It could, I know, I mean, I know that when they looked at us before, I think it was mentioned that we had a generally very high debt, but
That's what I thought I
it
remembered.
also looked very good on us for the amount of cash that we were carrying.
Okay.
I know, I mean, we carry a sizable amount of cash. Having multiple enterprise funds helps that, but that was definitely favorable on us. So for some reason, we spent down all of our sewer fund on something that could negatively impact, without even moving our debt. Just spending down cash balances can also negatively impact that.
Okay.
So if you've got a lot of debt, if you can carry cash, it kind of offsets you, and it seems to offset. I don't make the decisions. In the past, it seems to have offset us.
Right. I was just thinking with some of the big projects that we've been
Yeah.
discussing, that could weigh heavily on the,
Absolutely.
thank you. That was the only question I had. Mitch.
Any other questions? Thank you.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Abby.
So, next is to accept the annual audit as presented.
So moved.
Rick made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And Bruce seconded it. Any other discussion or questions? All up in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the public is invited to be heard on matters not on the agenda. Is there any public that wants to talk to the council on matters not on the agenda, online or in person? I don't see any, so we'll move on to the next item is the resolution for the conditional use permit for Howard Braith.
Farm. All right, so, as mentioned, this is to go over the conditional use permit, that was seen by the planning commission here, I believe, just this last week, correct? For Braith Auto. So as some background, Braith Auto is currently sitting on about 6,700 square feet, out at the industrial park there on 6th Avenue. Most recently, they did an expansion back in 2022. And they would like to construct an additional 3,200 square foot standalone building to operate kind of as an auto parts shop with retail sales. The city does allow retail sales as a conditional use within the Iowa Industrial District, but the primary regulation is that it should not exceed 30% of the gross floor area of the building. Now, this would limit the 3,200 square foot building to having only 960 square feet of retail, which wouldn't really be feasible for what their plan is. And so, adding on to the existing building is not possible without running into further building code issues such as fire suppression and the like. So they would like to have a standalone building. If the 3,200 square foot shop were connected, they would be able to have up to 2,976 square feet of it be allowed as retail. So you're looking at a sizable difference between the two, almost 2,000 square feet. And so in that instance, to have it as a standalone, they would need a variance to exceed that 30% limit. At the April 26th meeting, the Planning Commission did review the request, and comments were received from Howard himself. Timing of construction at this point has not yet been determined. The 6th Avenue construction project that's going on this summer did seem to fit perfectly with the timeline, which is why we're moving this forward. That way we could fit in curb cuts and whatnot with having to recut fresh curb. And then, as mentioned, it would be beneficial for them to have a parts store nearby, and it would help utilize a piece of the property that currently just gets mowed and is unused. The Planning Commission did have general discussion for issuing a variance, but felt that this was a good fit in this case. And the Planning Commission recommended approval 3-0. Here's a picture of the property. On the left is the aerial, kind of with the general location shown there in red. And then on the right just kind of shows the zoning being all I-1. And then zooming a little closer shows a little bit more. As you can see on the north side of the lot, there would be the building facing 6th Avenue there with the parking stalls out front, and it would be accessed and kind of completely detached from the shop on the south side of the lot. Next, we just have a few pictures of the lot as it currently sits there. On the left, you can see Braith Auto, and then on the lower right, you can kind of see where the street will be connecting on through. And finally, both staff and Planning Commission do recommend approval of conditional use permit C4 2023 and variance of V2 2023 to allow for retail sales in a new 3,200 square foot standalone building in the light industrial districts with the findings and conditions contained in the drafted resolution that you should have in your packet. So if you have any questions, I will attempt to answer them. As I mentioned, Ken is at a band concert tonight for his son, so hopefully you don't throw me any major curveballs.
Is there any questions of the council? Go ahead.
No,
Oh,
I was
I
just gonna
thought
say
you-
we make, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 23-05-01-02, conditional use permit C4-2023 and variance V2-2023 to allow for retail sales.
And I'll second.
Okay, the motion's been made by Sean, seconded by Maggie. Is there any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. There you go. Thank you. Yep, you're welcome.
Good luck.
General business, True North vulnerability assessment update.
Yes, I had brought this to you in the beginning of April, and it was mentioned that you'd like a little more detail. So I did talk to CTS and included the attached sheet, which fit nicely on a 11 by 17 sheet, but you can kind of zoom in on your computer a little bit. Kind of just breaking down the various items and giving kind of a more layman's terms. Some of them still got a little bit wordy for me. I think that is the nature of IT and me not being in it. But if you have any specific questions, I guess I did also include the past reports as given to us back in 2022. So if you wanted to kind of compare and read more specifics about those, but all of this, I know the reports are already on the shared drive. I will put the memo update, if I haven't already put it in there. I'm trying to remember, it's all running together now, on there. So if you guys have any questions in the future too, we can certainly go through this. As staff, we'll continue to try to, I know what we were told is basically we're lacking policy is the biggest thing that we're lacking. And so I will try to continue working with staff to build out policy. We'll start slowing down on policy a little bit now as we implement and then try to get stuff off the ground. We're currently working on both hardware and software inventories to give us actual physical inventories for those, since it doesn't look like we've ever really had any. And then you'll probably be seeing some policies in the future of trying to nail that down further,
So then, does CTS get a copy of this, or do we provide a copy to CTS?
So CTS is the one that put this all together.
Oh, I thought it was True North.
So True North did the 4 reports, and the large spreadsheet that kind of talks about the vulnerability and gives a quick summary of whether it's internal, external, severity of it, whether, who was assigned that at CTS, the ticket number and the status of that.
So they're working on stuff.
They have completed all of the, risks that would be considered critical, high, or medium, according to the reports.
Thank you.
So on the IT physical security recommendations, so that's.
Yes.
Starting on page 358. Are there any critical components there that we need to jump on sooner rather than later?
It didn't sound like there was anything necessarily where they're like, you need to take care of this right now when CTS was talking to us. A lot of it was explaining what the risk was and we deciding whether we want to go forward with it. Some of it was as risky as I think the day that they were walking through, we happened to have the door downstairs leading up here was open. And so
Right,
they flagged
right.
that as a risk because the door was open. And so it's up to us whether we want to accept that risk of having that door on the stairs open or not. Like I said, we'll continue to work through this with them. I don't remember them picking anything out physical security wise that they thought needed to be absolutely fixed right now.
All right, well, yeah, and reading the report, they don't rank it as, high, medium, or low, or whatever, so like the 10th Avenue booster, there's no security cameras on the building perimeter, things like that.
Some of that, Maggie, we are in the process of adding, I'm sorry. We are in the process of adding video security to the west substation, filter plant number 2, or excuse me, filter 3, and a few other locations, just as budgets permit. And then also a lot of the actual security of, say, open racks or whatever are equipment that's more or less related to SCADA and not so much vulnerability of the city system. And those are isolated via different filters and IP addresses, so that and we just recently separated that totally, so that SCADA system is running independently of the city system. So should one or the other be hacked into, that they're both not vulnerable at the same time. Especially if the city system, how it is outward looking a lot more. We don't want them to be able to get back in to control wells and that type of thing. So those have been
Right,
isolated.
okay, great. And then the same for the East Water Tower?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes, and how we have our own fiber system, that does
Yeah.
afford us the ability to isolate that, so.
okay, great. Yeah, I was just kind of scanning through these, so I just wanted to make sure that if there was something that was of importance, that we do hop on that right away, considering vandalism.
And all of these are things that, like I said, we're keeping on our radar, and in an ideal world, we'll be able to fix all of them. So it is.
Right, yeah.
It is us keeping track of them and seeing how much we can hack off year after year.
Yeah, and then folding some of this into policy
Yep,
about door closures and that sort of thing.
correct.
So have you kept a separate spreadsheet of these items? Because they're not in the other spreadsheet.
Oh, like the physical items? You mean?
I'm just to the page that I think Maggie was referencing with the recommendations. How do we follow up and how do we manage or monitor it? Whether you're making a decision to do it, not do it, or it's not a risk or that type of thing.
Yeah, so it's not on the CTS spreadsheet.
Correct. CTS spreadsheet was just their own spreadsheet of the internal programming
Okay.
vulnerabilities they were keeping track of. Unless Bruce has started one, I have not necessarily started a spreadsheet for what we've worked on or haven't worked on in terms of physical stuff at this point.
Correct. But I know CTS does have one, because we do meet annually with them in regards
Oh,
to,
that's-
and they do ask us where we're at in regards to doing that. We should get a copy of our own for ourselves. So.
Yeah,
Well, I think that my perspective is this report's laid on us, so we have to react to it. And so we're asking you, management, to react to it and show us what you're gonna do. And they make all these recommendations. And I guess we just need to know, or I would like to know what you're gonna do. Which ones are you gonna do, not do, or why don't we need to do them?
Okay, yeah, we can put something together.
it's just, I think, so it just doesn't get lost, right, so it's easy to read and go, yeah, we should do this, but there's gotta be a way to project manage it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I know, it's more stuff to do.
I was just looking at the key, inventory and, it looks like Jim, Patty, they still have keys or what is the deal with that?
Where are you at? What page is that?
Key
At,
inventory.
390,
390?
yep.
Yes, that was back in
It
2022.
couldn't be because, she's on it.
We've collected that key, those keys.
Yeah, so that
Yes.
can be erased,
Yes.
updated.
The only other comment I wanted, or was going to make is the spreadsheet, and thanks for doing all that and putting it, or having them put it together. I think that's kind of what I was looking for anyway, so I appreciate that. A lot of the, solutions or comments, I think, in that spreadsheet refers to updates and, or what was used to rectify it was updates and things like that. And just to make sure that CTS or someone has a schedule, you made mention that you're gonna do an inventory of software and hardware, which I think is fantastic if we're not doing that already, but then it should also have some kind of a triggering mechanism to make sure we're checking if there are any updates for these various areas. And some of these things that they made updates for would be more CTS related, so I'm not sure if it seems to me it's something I would think they should have known about updating. Or I guess I don't know enough about this to know, but if we had a problem that things weren't updated and that was a solution to correct it, we should have a procedure or something in place in the future that we're checking these things or CTS is in charge of it.
And I can't speak for all of them. I do know some of them CTS said they were updates that manufacturers hadn't even put out yet. So some of these were, because I think it took about 6 months to complete this whole list, because some of them they'd contact people and be like, you have an update, this is a problem. And they might be informing the person the first time that somebody has found a problem with their software and then waiting on an update, basically.
Right, some of them seem like, a few of them seem to be switch firmware, which I'm sure staff wouldn't have any idea of how to, maybe not.
No,
But CTS I would assume we would expect that they would be on top of that, so.
yep.
Or
And-
there's
and-
some date or something that we're checking with them to make sure they're doing it, or they're checking with us or something.
So does CTS do the kind of monitor, so if they need patches, they need,
Yeah, so
different firmware and
part of
things
our
like that?
contract
Yeah.
with them is basically to be our IT department.
Sure.
So they should be doing all of that stuff.
Which is routine always monitoring for any vulnerabilities, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, next item up is the Memorial Day Parade.
Wow, something fun.
Is this, why is this separate? I was just curious why it wasn't in the consent agenda. Is there a reason?
I think I just talked to Ken about this, and I received a letter from Linda Dvorak, who's the new commander,
Okay,
and Paul Bush had been previously. So, Paul came in and talked to me. I'd sent a note back to Linda that just said that the city had moved towards their large assembly permits and kind of directed him that route. So, when I asked Paul, I said, how many people are you expecting? I said, are you gonna have 250 or more, which would require our large event permit? He said, oh yeah, we'll have that many. And then Linda seemed to think that they wouldn't have anywhere close to that number. So there's kind of a misconception on how many people actually are gonna be there. So Ken and I just discussed it and said that we would forego the large assembly permit this year, evaluate and see how many people are there, and reassess it for next year. So
okay.
nothing has changed from what we've done in the past, other than they're not gonna be applying for a large assembly permit just because we don't know how many people are actually gonna attend the event. So
Okay.
we'll assess it this year and get kind of a head count, and if we need to do a permit for next year, we will certainly do that.
So you're not requiring any action at all on it?
Well, just to hold the permit, or just to hold the parade on Main Street is all I'm looking for. With approval from that, I'll get the permit then from MinDOT.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's been a motion by Rick, seconded by Maggie to approve the Memorial Day Parade permit. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Gotcha. Okay, so now miscellaneous, I'll go around the horn. Rick, do you have anything?
Yes, it would be nice if we could see what the results of, the new proposed police department would be on here. You see what I mean? I'm just wondering if you bring that debt up,
Oh.
what it's gonna do to the numbers.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we'll,
At least give us a roundabout idea, you know?
yeah, I mean, as we're working through stuff, I will certainly be able to provide numbers, and we get numbers from them, that updates our numbers, and so, I mean, that financial plan will be a working document as we go forward, and so as we gain information, it'll be able to be updated and tightened down and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Anything else? Rick?
Nope.
Bruce?
I just congratulate, Robin and Josh on a successful audit. There's some findings and things there, but assuming it all went well, you guys worked okay with that Abdo. I would think about a request maybe next time around, if we could get it a little sooner.
Yep.
It's a lot to try to digest, and maybe we could, for me that asks more questions, if I could ask the questions earlier and maybe save time and not have everyone sit through it. But
Okay.
That would be nice.
if you could get it,
I like your questions, Bruce.
well,
I tease.
but to try to look through an audit
Yep.
in that amount of time, and I've looked through a lot of audits, so but to look through it is kinda hard to do in
When
3
do you,
days.
when do you get it, Robin? Just curious when you got it. I'm not, don't wanna put you on the spot.
I wanna say we probably had it 10 days, maybe 2 weeks before the council packet. I mean, we had drafts prior to that.
Yep, yep.
But, final wasn't extremely long beforehand, so,
Okay.
but I would think it's reasonable that we can send it once we have the final drafts and we've had time to look through, so.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, that's it.
Okay. I don't have anything. Sean?
I don't either.
Maggie?
No, sir?
Josh?
You skip over Rick?
No, he started it.
Oh, all right. Just one thing. So you would have all gotten an email from WatchGuard last week, 2 weeks ago now at this point. That email kind of went out unannounced, and I think just about everyone from city staff deleted the email because we were like, nope, you're not fooling us. And we all deleted it. Well, it turns out anybody who we are setting up for VPN access to servers, so the ability to access servers outside of City Hall, needs to sign up for WatchGuard. So I will be sending out an email here to you all, and then I believe it's 28 other staff members who will have access. So that way they can get this watch card. What it basically does is sets up multi-factor authentication. So if you are, I don't believe it'll be all the time, but it'll at times when you try to access the server from off, it'll send a code to your phone, where you then have to basically match up the codes. That way, if for some reason somebody has stolen your stuff and is trying to access in, they will have to somehow also gain access to your phone as well to be able to get through that information. So it'll hopefully just make our servers more secure.
So it just wasn't another
It was
solicitation?
not spam like every single one of us thought it was. I know I deleted it, and about an hour later, I got a call from CTS saying, you should have gotten an email to sign up for WatchGuard. Well, we all did, and we all deleted it.
Is
So
it an update to it? Because I have that already and use it.
I believe there are certain people who are already using it, but it was very sporadic. There was no like set policy of how it was set up. And so this is just making sure that everybody who's accessing remotely has this multi-factor authentication set up.
Okay, so I've use it, and will I now have to do multi-factor?
Yes, and yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So this will basically just set it up on your phone to connect the two together.
Okay.
So you hope, I'm gonna try to get that email out tomorrow to all of you guys, and then it sounds like Maggie got a hold of me and the link doesn't work anymore.
Right,
Or it's like timed out.
Time's out.
expired,
Yeah, so I'll try to get a hold of them to resend that out, so we can get that all underway.
Yeah, I thought it was a phishing email, of course,
Well,
and that's
yeah,
why
I mean,
I emailed Josh, is this real?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, yeah, I guess I would, hats off to everyone for looking out for the city's data who deleted the email. Those who got fooled into just clicking on it, shame on you. You did the right thing, but shame on you. That is all I've got.
Okay, Robin?
I don't have anything.
Okay, Bruce?
So just a quick update, I sent out the email last week in regards to the water main break that we had. I get questioned a lot, and Facebook likes to question me a lot too in regards to whether I decide when that gets fixed, if we let it go overnight or whatever, and there's water running down the street. I've got to weigh those costs against what it costs businesses to be shut down of water during their prime time, and the coordination of that and locates and things like that. So hopefully, I know you guys are always understanding of that when I got to make those decisions, but typically when we run some raw water down the storm sewer, it isn't as bad as the public thinks.
Yep.
In regards to cost. I'll even weigh it sometimes against overtime and things like that, just to cost that out. We did discover though, similar to other areas that we encountered last year over there in Phillips Parkway and things like that, we do have a fairly good amount of water main there that is in really bad shape. And so I'll be presenting some stuff to the commission, and we've been working with the engineers here a little bit in regards to, we're probably gonna have to do a little bit of replacement in that area there. I'm thinking this summer, so, more to come on that, but, yeah, I think that was installed in 1980, and I think we've got some bad water main that was put in the ground there at that time, and it's, corroding away, so, both inside and out, so, more to come on that.
You know, it's no different than any other water main, except everybody that drove by saw it. You don't, I mean, you don't get questioned on any other ones.
Yep.
And, people saw it bubbling, because like in the wintertime, usually you let it run so the ground unthaws.
Right.
And this just happened to happen when it did, but it was, I'll tell you, I'm not gonna say it publicly, but, Facebook, it's like, let's show everybody how smart I am by posting something on there, maybe I did just say it publicly. It just.
You did.
Yeah. But,
I didn't.
but if you ever have questions of that, or people ask you,
Yeah.
feel free to.
It was noticeable in the ditch, and if you're in the walking path and you walk all the way past, where I live, you saw all the dirty water, and it was quite noticeable how the water was up higher and it's all dirty. It's been crystal clear and then to see it all turn to muddy was, I think maybe some people noticed that too.
Sure.
And no, I just appreciated the email coming out.
Yeah, I appreciate, that's good.
That's the big thing, so.
Okay.
Chief,
Nothing.
Matt?
So today, this afternoon, I decided to close the compost site to vehicle traffic. It is open just to walk-in traffic. Again, like Bruce, now I'm being criticized on Facebook on my decision. So the reason was we've had a lot of illegal dumping out there. A lot of people from outside the city dumping brush out there. We get calls almost weekly saying, hey, I just followed the vehicle from, just use an example, Cedar Lake or Lanesburg Township, and they all come to the compost site. This morning, after talking with Josh Hennon, our public works supervisor, they had a bunch of bags out there, just a bunch of garbage. We don't have cameras out there. Hopefully that's coming this summer with the grant we got for that food recycling. But we had to do something. I told Josh today that we really should not have a tree left in town for how much brush we take out there. It's crazy how much we get there. So I'm gonna close it for a week. And usually when we did this about 3 years ago, people start policing themselves and it gets much better. So we just had to do something. So I'll take the rap for a week or so and I'm gonna just keep it closed. I know this is a busy time for thatching, but the good part is the compost pile is right next to the gate. So it's not like they're walking real far in. So yeah, it's just something that needed to be done. And that's why we put it on social media and again, letting you guys know. So if you guys hear anything.
I saw that, and it's too bad that people take advantage.
Weren't we gonna put a gate on that one?
There is a gate.
There's a gate.
No, I mean with like where you'd have to,
A key swipe, yeah.
That would be great.
where every
But-
resident had a, I mean,
Could
there
get
was a
one.
lot of different
We had a lot of
avenues
suggestions. I
everything.
think Glenn presented probably 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
Um,
I thought we were moving forward
Now,
towards that,
well,
actually. I
now
don't-
with this organic compost recycling,
we'll have a camera out there at least.
well, but, people to access that will actually come to City Hall and sign out a key, because it'll be fenced in
To just that organic waste
just
site.
to
but-
that organic waste site. And, you'll have to have a key to get in there.
Okay.
So, people, because it goes into a dumpster, and then Lakers takes it away, and just to control garbage dumping and stuff
Right.
there, but.
So, that's all I got.
You know, Matt, you bring up a good point, because we've had some discussion about this when, you know, about using a key card. My husband and I belong to a gun club, and they do the same thing, where they've got, you just swipe your key and the gate just is on a chain, you know, so it opens up and then closes automatically behind. I don't know what kind of a headache that would be for the city of issuing those key cards and then people losing them or misplacing them. You know, maybe it's a nominal fee or a replacement cost, something along those lines. But, you know, it seems as if we're running into more of a problem with junk just being dumped there, and then people not within the city limits using it to dump their brush, which, you know, thankfully they're not dumping it on the side of the road, but yet this is for the citizens of New Prague. So I would certainly be in favor of looking at something to help monitor and prevent the overdumping by people that shouldn't be using the facility.
I can come up with some options. I know, like I said, 3-4 years ago, I put something together for Glenn to kind of present to you guys, and I can kind of go over that stuff again with you guys if you'd be interested.
Yeah, you know, because it's not, doesn't have to be high tech by any means, but, you know, and we can't have a person posted there, you
Yeah,
know, an
that's-
employee posted, so. So, and I've experienced the same thing too when I've used it, and I've seen people leave the confines of New Prague and travel off somewhere else, so.
Yeah, just for kind of a, so today Josh locked it up after I told him, I asked him to take some pictures so I could post it on Facebook. And he said, I feel really bad, like I was just leaving and there's a vehicle coming with a big load of brush in the back. And while I was talking to him, my office faces 12th Street, and all of a sudden this vehicle drives right by us. I said, well, this would be interesting to see where he's going, and sure enough, he's heading outside of town. So I'm like, well, there's a perfect reason why. I mean, I'm a person that uses the compost site, and I follow the rules. So
Yes.
it's rough for the people that are following the rules, but at a certain point, you got to do something to try to mitigate the cost on all city residents of tires and garbage. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a
You're
cost to
right.
that.
Yes, there
So-
is.
Did you say the bags were garbage, or
I'm sorry, what was that?
the bags you mentioned earlier, were they garbage or were they?
No,
tree
it's like
trimming?
plastic bags. So you can have the paper recyclable that break down, but there's a lot of plastic bags people use for leaves and
They just
brush.
throw
They
them
just
off.
throw them in the pile.
They just throw
Instead
them,
of
Okay.
dumping
tearing
them
them
out.
open.
One of the times we talked about this in the past, I thought there was reference to a washing machine and some stuff like that was taken.
yeah.
Mattresses.
There has
yeah.
been, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I got pictures of that. Yep.
So if we, do we have the legal right to, for law enforcement to see the video and see a license plate and then look it up?
Yeah, that'd be considered legal dumping, correct?
Yes.
And we've busted, or I shouldn't say busted, we've caught a few people. That sounded terrible.
But how would you, or what legal authority do you have to look at the license plate to determine if they live in the New Prague area or not, or New Prague City or not?
I would say that if we were able to determine that there was a dump that was an illegal dump, like someone dumped a load of tires or something that would be illegal to dump, I think you'd have a hard time finding that nexus between a load of brush opposed to like a dishwasher or a load of tires or.
So that wouldn't correct the out-of-town or illegal dumpers that are coming from out of town then? If a
Well,
video,
I don't think it would, you'd have to make that nexus to that crime. So for us to look at that, are we gonna run every license plate that comes through there and say, do you live in the city of New Prague for an ordinance violation? I don't know that we could do that. I think for the
Right.
majority of the bigger items that you would, are obviously dumping violations, you could certainly do that.
Right,
So
so
you
that- I
could-
guess that wouldn't solve that issue then.
So you couldn't take like one of them readers that are on squad cars and have it mounted to the pole by the camera and have it automatically go through? There's no such animal?
There are a lot of, you're talking like a license plate reader?
Yep.
The LPRs, yeah, so there's a lot of policy and procedure that goes along with the license plate reader. There are audits, retention schedules and things that go along with that, and a majority of the license plate readers are used to find stolen cars, people with warrants, things of that nature, so what you're actually hitting, so it'll hit an alert if there's like a wanted person for a warrant or a stolen vehicle or something. We would maintain that data, but what we could use that data for wouldn't necessarily be the same purpose that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I don't think it would be,
Yeah, the policy would not allow us to do
this
that.
law
Yep.
would not allow us.
Those attorneys.
But, yeah, no, that's good.
Well, thanks, Matt, if you want to kind of resurrect what you did and see what we can. Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Patrick? Nothing, okay. All right, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Maggie seconded the motion by Rick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And then we'll have a special city council meeting
Weather clearing on, I'm gonna